Although by architecture great and excellent buildings had already been everywhere constructed, they all remained far behind the Holy Temple, which the wise King Solomon caused to be erected in Jerusalem to the honor of the true God, where he employed an uncommonly large number of workmen, as we find in the Holy Scriptures. And King Hiram of Tyre also added a number to them. Among these assistants were sent was King Hiram's most skillful architect, a widow's son, whose name was Hiram Abiff, and who afterwards made the most exquisite arrangements and furnished the most costly works, all of which are described in the Holy Scriptures. The whole of these workmen were, with King Solomon's approval, divided into certain classes, and thus at this great building was first founded a worthy society of architects. Whether the author of the Krauss manuscript had copied from Anderson or Anderson from him, both from some other document which is no longer extant, is a question that has already been discussed. But the description of the temple and its connection with the history of Masonry are given by Dr. Anderson, with much of the features of the Krauss form of the legend, except that the details are more copious. Now, what was taught concerning the temple by Anderson in his history, contained in the first edition of the Constitutions, although afterward polished and perfected by Preston and other ritual makers, is substantially the same as that which is taught at the present day in all the lodges. Therefore, notwithstanding that Dr. Krauss asserts, footnote, die drei ältesten Konstruktionen, Volume 1, page 155, note 41. Krauss asserts that the Temple of Solomon is no symbol, certainly not a prominent one of the English system. I am constrained to believe that it was one of the prominent symbols alluded to in the medieval legend, and that the symbol of the temple upon which so much of the symbolism of modern speculative masonry depends was, in fact, suggested to the revivalists by the narrative contained in the legend of the craft. Whether the operative masons of the Middle Ages, who seem to have accepted this legend as authentic history, had also, underlying the narrative, a symbolic interpretation of the temple and of certain incidents that are said to have occurred in the course of its erection, as referring to this life and the resurrection to a future one, or whether that interpretation was in existence at the time when the legend of the craft was invented and was subsequently lost sight of, only to be recovered in the beginning of the 18th century, are questions that will be more appropriately discussed in succeeding pages of this work, when the subject of the myths and symbols of Freemasonry is under consideration. But it is evident that between the narrative in the legend concerning the temple, with its three builders, the kings of Israel and Tyre, and Solomon's master of the works, and the symbolism of modern speculative masonry in allusion to the same building and the same personages, there has been a close consecutive connection. Hence again, we find that the legend of the craft is of value in reference to the light which it throws on the progress of Masonic science and symbolism, which otherwise it would not possess, if it were to be considered as a mere mythical narrative without any influence on history. Before concluding this subject, it will be necessary to refer to the name of the chief builder of the temple, and whose name has undergone that corruption in all the manuscripts to which all proper names have been subjected in those documents. Of course, it is known from the testimony of Scripture that the real name and title of this person, as used in reference to King Solomon and himself, was Hiram-Abiff, that is, his father, Hiram. Footnote. When the king of Tyre speaks of him, it is as Hiram-Abi, that is, my father, Hiram. 2 Chronicle 2:13. This Hebrew appellative is found for the first time in Masonic documents in Anderson's constitutions, and in the Krause manuscript, both being of the date of the early part of the 18th century. Previous to that period, we find him variously called in all the old manuscripts, from the Dowland in 1550 to the Alnwick in 1701, Ammon, Ammon, Anwan, Anyon, Anon, and Ajuan. Now, of what word are these a corruption? Footnote. The Papworth manuscript, whose supposed date is 1714, rejects all these words and calls him Benaim, which is a misspelling of Bonaim, builders, and that a grammatical error for Bonne, the builder. The writer had evidently got an inkling of the new form which the legend was beginning to assume. Anderson, it will be recollected, speaks of the Bon.I, builders in stone. Cook manuscript does not give any name, but only says that the king's son of Tyre was Solomon's master mason. All the other and succeeding manuscripts, without exception, admit this relation. Thus the Dowland, in which it is followed by all the others, says that King Hiram had a son that was called Aignon, and he was a master of geometry, and was chief master of all Solomon's masons. The idea was thus established that this man was of royal dignity, the son of a king, and that he was also a ruler of the craft. Now, the Hebrew word Adon denotes a lord, a prince, a ruler, or master. It is, in short, a title of dignity. In the Book of Kings, we meet with Adoniram, was one of the principal officers of King Solomon, and who, during the construction of the temple, performed an important part as the chief or superintendent of the levy of 30,000 laborers who worked on Mount Lebanon. The old Masons may have confounded this person with Hiram from the similarity of the terminational syllables. The modern Continental Masons committed the same error when they established the right of Adoniram or Adon-Iram, and gave to Hiram-Abiff the title of Adon-Hiram, or the Lord or Master Hiram. If the old Masons did this, then it is evident that they abbreviated the full name and called him Adon. but I am more inclined to believe that the author of the first or original old manuscript, of which all the rest are copies, called the chief builder of Solomon Adon, Lord and Master, in allusion to his supposed princely rank and his high position as the chief builder or master of the works at the temple. The corruption from Adon to Anon or Amon or even Ajuan is not greater than what occurs in other names in these manuscripts, as where Hermes is transmuted into Hermarines and Euclid into Englet. Indeed, the copyists of these medieval documents appear to have had a Gallic facility in corrupting the orthography of all foreign names, very often almost totally destroying their identity. As to the real meaning of Hiram Abiff, either as a historic or symbolic character, that topic will be thoroughly considered in another part of this work, when the subject of Masonic symbols comes to be considered. The topic of the corruption of the name in the old manuscripts and its true signification will again be treated when I come to investigate the legend of Hiram Abiff.